So the Kevin Durant sweepstakes are officially on, and hopefully he doesn't get traded by the time I get the opportunity to release this video. But I got to thinking about a team that could probably trade for Kevin Durant, and it's a team that we've seen do this type of move before. But I think the Raptors have a legit shot at moving in on Kevin Durant, picking him up, bringing him in, and doing another Kawhi Leonard-like deal. Bringing him in to help out Fred VanVleet, to help out OG Anunoby, because they have plenty of assets that they could trade away without really losing a beat. Right now, their roster is probably not good enough to compete for an NBA championship, but if they add KD, of course, that's going to take you over the hump. One of the most gifted scorers of all time. Before we get started, make sure to like button and subscribe button if you do enjoy at any point, and leave me a comment down below. Now let's go ahead and get started looking at his preferred destinations, which are the Phoenix Suns and the Miami Heat. So Kevin Durant said he wanted to cement his legacy of being able to win by himself. So what does he do? As soon as the Warriors, the team he just left, win the NBA championship, he goes out and demands a trade to the 2-1 seeds in the NBA in the Eastern and Western conferences, respectively. I think that's a bit interesting. If he goes to Phoenix, of course, it would probably be a sign and trade package around DeAndre Ayton. If he goes to Miami, I'm not sure what the Heat would be wanting to give up. I feel like that the Raptors have as good of a package if they're willing to part ways with their guys of either of these teams. Now, KD got tired of that situation in Brooklyn, so he's looking to move on elsewhere. Got tired of the whole Kyrie Irving drama every day. So, yeah, he's looking to move on, and I think that, he'll probably end up on one of these teams, but it's a fun situation to look at here if he does go to the Toronto Raptors, because look at all these assets they have to give up. I mean, you're only looking at giving up a couple of these guys. You still get to retain at least three. You're looking at Precious Achiuwa there in the middle, who I think the Raptors will get. There's no way in the world Masai Ujiri, I believe is how you pronounce it, gets rid of him. Apparently he is in love with him. Now, Pascal Siakam, that's a guy that you would probably have to move in a Kevin Durant deal. We'll talk about it in a second, further in depth, but to make the salaries match up, he's a guy you'd probably have to move, and then you'd have to throw in one of the sweeteners, either the Rookie of the Year, Gary Trent Jr., or OG Anunoby. One of those three guys would probably have to be a sweetener. Probably Trent or OG, just due to contract. You gotta match the money, and Kevin Durant is making a lot of money. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we've seen this before. The fun guy. He came to Toronto. He won a championship on a one-year rental. Of course, they had to trade away their best player at the time in DeMar DeRozan, as well as a up-and-coming young prospect in Jakob Poeltl, and they traded that in for a championship. This was a squad that they had up in Toronto, and you look at the Kevin Durant to Kawhi Leonard comparisons. Of course, Kawhi is a much better defender, but Kevin Durant's probably the greatest scorer we've ever seen touch a basketball. So, they're both top 5 players when healthy. So I think, it's kind of similar. And you didn't have to give up all that much for Kawhi when you look at it. But that his trade value was way down. There are huge sweepstakes going on for Kevin Durant right now. It's not the same situation that they were trading for. Now, let's take a look at the draft capital, because it's probably going to take upwards of 3 picks, at least 3 first-round picks, to sway the Nets into choosing your trade package, and they have all their picks. The only pick they don't have is their 2024 second-round pick, and that's not really going to turn the tide or tip the scales in a potential deal. So having all of your future first-round picks, that is a very, very good sign for this Toronto Raptors club when it comes to trading for Durant. Now, the money situation. As I mentioned, Pascal Siakam making the big bucks. He's probably going to be traded away. Kevin Durant is making $44 million next year, $46 million the year following, $49 million the year after that, and then the final year of his deal is making $53 million. Gary Trent Jr., he's making $18 million as well as OG Anunoby, and then Fred VanVleet about $20. So a few of those guys are going to have to be traded just to make the money work. And they are about $7 to $8 million under the salary cap. Now, it's going to take a lot to get the Durantula, so here is my proposed trade package. You've got Pascal Siakam, of course, your best player. When you look at this compared to the Kawhi Leonard deal, they had to give up DeMar DeRozan. Here, they have to give up Pascal Siakam, and they're bringing their new superstar in to their franchise point guard, who in the Kawhi case, it was Kyle Lowry. Now it's going to be Fred VanVleet. You also have to throw in Gary Trent Jr., another guy. He helps make the money work, and he's also a very nice asset to have as a young player. I believe he's only 24 years old. And then they throw in this year's second-round pick in Christian Koloko, who was the number 33 overall pick. Hasn't even played a single minute for the Raptors. And he's a very intriguing prospect. The Nets could definitely use some center help. Now, they would also throw in a 2023 and 2025 unprotected first-round pick, as well as a 2024 pick swap. So maybe you need to throw in a little bit more draft capital than that, but I think giving up Siakam and Gary Trent Jr., maybe you don't even have to throw in 3 picks. Maybe you can get away with just a 2023 and a 2025 or something like that. Now, it's a win-win-win for all 3 sides. The first side being Kevin Durant, where he gets a chance to go out and cement his legacy as not just a guy that got carried by Steph to a couple NBA Finals appearances and wins. The Raptors, they get to become instant contenders because, as we're about to look at, their lineup is going to be insane if they add in Kevin Durant. And then the Brooklyn Nets, the final team, we're also going to take a look at their lineup. But, they get to stay competitive because they're adding in 2 guys that can come in and contribute right away with Pascal Siakam, with Gary Trent Jr., and then they get a guy in Christian Koloko that can turn into something on down the road. So it's a win-win-win trade, in my opinion. Y'all have to let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Now, let's take a minute here to look at the lineups, the potential lineups, if KD does switch sides. Of course, this would be the Raptors, and they have Fred VanVleet at the point guard spot, OG Anunoby, Scotty Barnes, goodness, I couldn't think of his name there for a second, and then Kevin Durant. They will all kind of be interchangeable at the 2 through 4 spots. They won't really have a true position. It'll really just be Fred VanVleet at the 1, Precious at the 5, and then KD through Scotty Barnes and OG Anunoby. They're just interchangeable. They will also have some guys off the bench like Chris Boucher, Thad Young, Otto Porter Jr., who they just brought in. So they will need some more guard depth, but they can probably take care of that. I believe they also still have Svi Mykhailiuk. So now, looking at the Brooklyn Nets roster, you have Kyrie Irving, if he does decide to play, as well as Gary Trent Jr. joining him in that backcourt. So there is a lot of scoring there in that backcourt. Not much defense, and you lose Bruce Brown, so that will kind of hurt. But assuming they bring back Joe Harris, he will be their starting 3. Pascal Siakam there at the 4. And then at the 5, you've got Nick Claxton, who just re-signed with the Nets the other day to, I believe, a 2-year, $20 million deal. So this is still a very competitive lineup in Brooklyn, too. Don't get it twisted. Now, the Raptors, they don't need picks. Their track record without first-round picks, I mean, they won an NBA championship without having a lottery pick on the roster. They are probably the best team at going and finding talent and developing it and turning it into, all-NBA type players. So I think they will be just fine if they have to give up even more picks than originally planned. Maybe they can get out of giving up a Gary Trent Jr., but we'll see. So thank you so much for watching today's video. This was kind of a fun hypothetical. I do believe he'll probably go to the Suns or the Heat. But yeah, with all that being said, that's going to be it for today's video. Make sure to leave me a comment down below what you think of the trade. And yeah, with all that being said, thank you so much for watching today's video.